The wedding ring was sitting on a folded paper towel beside the kitchen sink when I found it. No note yet. Just the ring. Gold band I'd saved 4 months of transmission work to buy. Sitting there like a piece of scrap metal someone left behind. My wife of 19 years was gone, my payroll account was about to bounce, and my 13-year-old son already knew all of it before I did. Let me tell you what the worst kind of silence sounds like. I need to tell you this story because I've been carrying it for almost a year now, and some mornings it still catches me like a cracked rib. I keep forgetting about fine until I breathe wrong. I'm not telling it for sympathy. I'm telling it because someone watching this right now is standing in a kitchen they don't recognize anymore, holding something that used to mean everything, and wondering if they're going to be okay. You are. But let me show you how I found that out. My name is Raymond. I own a transmission and brake shop off Vernor Highway in Detroit's southwest side, 2 blocks from the taqueria where I've eaten lunch every Tuesday for 12 years. I'm 54 years old. I've rebuilt engines in January cold with bare hands. I've talked suppliers down from pulling accounts when I was 30 days out. I've done hard things. Nothing prepared me for a Tuesday in October when I woke up at 5:19 in the morning and realized the bed beside me had been cold for hours. Not just Vanessa's side. The whole room felt wrong. You know how a garage feels different when a vehicle's been moved out in the middle of the night? That particular emptiness, like the air itself is confused. That's what our bedroom felt like. I sat up slow, my lower back protests everything before 6 a.m. Now, 30 years of leaning into engine bays will do that to a man, and I just listened. Rain on the gutters. The ceiling fan's familiar wobble. Nothing else. Vanessa wasn't in the bathroom. Wasn't downstairs. The closet door stood half open, and when I looked inside, I understood the silence immediately. Half her clothes were gone. Not all of them. Half. Like she'd packed in a hurry. Or like she'd been packing slowly for weeks, and I'd simply never looked closely enough. Both possibilities made my stomach drop in different ways. I walked downstairs barefoot. Every step on those old hardwood floors sounded louder than it should have. The kitchen smelled like coffee fresh enough that she couldn't have been gone more than a couple of hours before dawn. And there it was, the ring on the paper towel. Her grandmother's diamond chip in the setting I'd upgraded for our 10th anniversary, sitting beside the dish rack like it meant nothing at all. I didn't find the note right away. I just stood there with that ring in my palm for what felt like a long time. I was thinking about the night I proposed parking lot of a Tigers game, raining, Vanessa laughing so hard she dropped the ring cap from the bottle I'd hidden it in, and somewhere in the middle of that memory, my phone buzzed on the counter. Bank alert. I opened it still half inside that parking lot memory, and then I was just standing in my kitchen, reading numbers that made no sense. Joint savings, $43. Business operating account, $211. Emergency reserve, 0. I refreshed the screen twice, 3 times. My hands were steady. I was proud of that later, in a strange way, but my chest had gone completely hollow. The note was tucked under the coffee pot. I want you to understand how deliberately that placement was chosen. She knew I'd find it when I poured my first cup. She knew exactly how my mornings worked. That's its own kind of cruelty. The note said, "Raymond, I need a life that doesn't smell like motor oil and spreadsheets. Marcus sees me in ways you stop trying to. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The house is yours. So is Darius." So is Darius. Like she was leaving me the lawnmower. I don't remember the drive to the shop. I was there before I knew I was moving. My shop, Cole's Transmission, the sign my father helped me paint 22 years ago, sat quiet in the early morning dark off Vernor, the neon buzzing faintly in the rain. I let myself in through the side door and stood in the middle of the floor between 2 lifted trucks I'd promised back by Friday. The fluorescent lights flickered on row by row. Buzz, click, buzz. That sound usually grounds me. That morning it just made everything look more exposed. I sat down on an overturned milk crate beside Bay 3, and I put my face in my hands, grease under my fingernails from yesterday. The rain on the metal roof sounded like the whole building was breathing, and I cried. Not the kind of crying where you make sounds. The quiet kind, where your shoulders shake and everything inside you just releases without permission. I'm not ashamed of it. A man spends decades building something and watches it start disappearing before sunrise. He's allowed 5 minutes on a milk crate. Maybe 10. Here's what I kept thinking, sitting there. I can diagnose a transmission problem by sound alone. I know when a belt is 3 weeks from failing by the way it smells under load. I've spent my entire adult life learning to read the warnings machines give before they break. My marriage gave me none of that. Or it did, and I chose not to hear it. I still don't know which one is true, and that uncertainty sits heavier than the betrayal itself. I want to be honest with you, sitting in that garage at 6 in the morning, I didn't feel angry yet. I felt stupid. That particular flavor of humiliation where you start asking yourself how long everyone else knew before you did. And the answer to that question, when it came, was worse than I ever anticipated. The side door opened around 7:15. Darius stepped in wearing sweatpants, an unzipped hoodie, and one untied shoe. He was 13, broad-shouldered for his age, with the careful eyes he'd had since he was small, always watching the room before he committed to it. He had his basketball in one hand. He looked around the garage first, the way kids do when they're trying to understand what they just walked into. Then he looked at me. "You didn't come home," he said, quietly, not accusing. I wiped my face and stood up. "Sorry, D." He looked at my truck keys on the workbench, looked at my face. Then he said, "Marcus took her, didn't he?" Not a question. That hit me harder than the bank alerts. Not just what he said, the fact that there was no surprise in his voice. Just a tired kind of acknowledgement, like he'd been waiting for this moment the way you wait for a forecast storm. I nodded once. Darius looked down at the concrete floor. There are oil stains in Bay 3 that he used to trace the outlines of with his finger when he was 6, sitting on that same milk crate waiting for me to finish work. He used to say the stains looked like countries on a map. I'd forgotten that until right then. "She take the money too?" he asked. "How'd you know that?" He shrugged, but it was an old shrug, not a kid's shrug. Marcus was always asking about the business, how much we cleared, whether the shop had a credit line. He paused. I thought maybe he was just nosy. I stared at my son. I really looked at him. There are moments when you suddenly see past the child you think you know into the person they've been quietly becoming. This was one of those moments, and it knocked the breath out of me. Because I could see it clearly now, Darius had been watching, worrying, and carrying this alone for longer than I knew. That night, we didn't really eat dinner. Around 8:30, Darius came into the kitchen carrying 2 bowls of reheated soup. One was slightly scorched on the bottom. "I forgot to stir it," he said. "It's fine," I said, and I meant it in more ways than soup. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table while rain streaked down the windows. After a while, Darius got up, walked to his room, and came back holding a manila folder worn at the edges, clearly something he'd been adding to for a while. His hands weren't steady when he set it on the table between us. "I didn't know what to do with this," he said. "I thought maybe I should tell you, but you said once that grown-ups have complicated friendships, and I thought..." He stopped. I thought maybe I was wrong about what I was seeing. I opened the folder slowly. Inside, a printed photo of a silver Dodge Charger parked down the block from our house. A screenshot of a hotel confirmation in Traverse City. A prepaid phone number with the words "Don't call from home" written beside it in Darius's careful handwriting. A photo, slightly blurry, of cash envelopes I kept in the shop safe taken through the office window from outside. And then a note, handwritten on a torn piece of notebook paper, that Darius had clearly found and photographed without touching. "After Detroit, we go to Columbus. Then you figure your own finances out. I'm not your sponsor." I set the folder down. My hands were very still. "Darius, where did you get all of this?" I just paid attention. He pulled at his sleeve. Marcus scared me. He grabbed my arm once when I came downstairs and he didn't hear me coming. Squeezed it hard. Said I startled him. He looked at the table. He wasn't startled. Something cold settled into my chest and didn't move for a long time. I thought about all the evenings I'd come home tired, kissed Vanessa on the cheek, ruffled Darius's hair, heated up whatever was on the stove, and gone to bed, assuming everything was basically fine. I thought about how many times Darius had been in the same room as that man. How many times I'd left my son alone with someone who physically intimidated him and called it a normal Tuesday. I got up from the table and walked around to him. He stiffened for just a second, that automatic flinch of a kid who's been tense for too long, and then I pulled him into a hug and held on. He held back immediately. Hard. The way kids hold on when they've been trying not to need anything for months. "I'm sorry," I said, "for not seeing it." "You were working," he said into my shoulder. "That's not an excuse good enough for you." He didn't answer for a while. Then, "I didn't want you to get hurt. I thought if I just kept watching, maybe it would stop on its own. I want you to sit with that for a second." A 13-year-old boy, already abandoned by his mother, quietly collecting evidence of a betrayal because he was trying to protect his father from pain. Some of you know exactly what it feels like to be the person in a family who absorbs the worry so no one else has to. Some of you did that as kids. You know how heavy that is. And you know how it feels when someone finally puts it down with you. The next morning, my office manager Brenda arrived at 7 sharp. She's worked my front desk for 16 years, knows everybody's business from Mexican Town to New Center, and communicates primarily through expressions that make grown men feel transparent. She walked in carrying 2 coffees from the BP, 2 blocks down, took one look at my face, and said, "What happened and how bad?" I handed her Vanessa's note without speaking. She read it once, then again. Then she looked up at me, with the particular expression she reserves for situations requiring both compassion and logistics. "The accounts," I said. Her face went from soft to steel in about 2 seconds. "How bad?" "Payroll is Monday." She put her coffee down. She hit the operating account. She tried the vendor account too. Didn't fully understand how the business structure worked. I sat down. She got most of it. Brenda looked toward the waiting area where Darius was pretending to read a car magazine. She lowered her voice. "Raymond, that's payroll fraud. That's not a civil matter. I know that now. I knew it then, technically. But knowing something legally and knowing it in your chest are different things, and my chest was still trying to process the image of a folded paper towel and a gold ring. We spent 4 hours going through accounts. Brenda kept muttering things under her breath that I won't repeat here, but at one point she looked up from the laptop and said, "Your wife treated the business reserve like a scratch-off." I laughed. Actually laughed. The real kind, where you don't mean to and your body does it anyway. That's what a good person does, finds you the one moment of absurd human comedy inside a catastrophe and hands it to you like a lifeline. The bank froze several accounts during the fraud review, which also froze money I needed. Monday payroll became very real, very fast. I spent Sunday afternoon selling my base boat. A man named Gerald, retired postal worker from Westland, drove over and bought it for $5,500 cash. He stood in my driveway, looking uncomfortable, the way decent people do when they can tell they're benefiting from someone else's disaster. "Good price," he said carefully. "I need quick," I said. He nodded like a man who'd had his own hard seasons and drove away with my 20 years of Saturday mornings hitched behind his truck. I stood there watching the trailer turn the corner for longer than made sense. Monday, the school called. Darius had punched a locker hard enough to bend the metal panel after another kid made a comment about his mother. I drove over immediately. The assistant principal sat across from me with the careful tone of someone who wants to be firm but has clearly already decided to give the situation grace. Darius sat beside me with an ice pack on his hand and his eyes on the linoleum. "He threatened another student," the AP said. Darius said nothing. Then finally, he said my mom left because our family was broke. The room went quiet. Then Darius looked up, not at the assistant principal, at me, and said something I still think about when I'm lying awake at 2 a.m. "She didn't leave because we were broke. She left because she wanted to be." He paused. "I just want people to understand the difference." I didn't know whether to cry or stand up and applaud. I did neither. I put my hand on his shoulder and left it there. That Tuesday night, just after midnight, my phone rang from an unknown Tennessee number. I answered half asleep. A woman's voice, low and fast. "Is this Raymond Cole?" "Yes." "Your wife's in trouble down here. She's asking people not to call you, but I thought someone should know." A pause. Distant voices. Then, faintly, Vanessa crying. The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time after that call, not making plans, just sitting with the complicated feeling of hearing someone you once loved in distress, from a number you don't recognize, in a state you didn't know they were in. You want to know something I'm not proud of? For about 30 seconds, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief. Just a vast, flat nothing. And then I felt sad, not for me, for the version of Vanessa that existed before whatever this became. The woman who used to fall asleep in the passenger seat on long drives and wake up pretending she'd been awake the whole time. You don't stop remembering just because someone breaks your trust. Memory doesn't respect what people deserve. The detective, a woman named Bryce, Detroit PD, transferred from financial crimes, called me the following morning. She explained it carefully. Vanessa and Marcus had checked into a roadside motel outside Clarksville. Marcus's credit cards declined. He got loud. He had a prior fraud conviction that put him on federal probation. The motel called local police for a noise complaint, and things escalated from there. Bryce told me a backpack had been recovered with my business cards inside. She said I could collect personal property identified as mine from the motel, so I drove to Tennessee. 6 hours of gray highway, rain the whole way, wipers clicking like a metronome, keeping time on a song I didn't ask to hear. I passed truck stops, billboards for personal injury lawyers, wet fields that looked like they understood how I felt. I kept thinking about Marcus, about what Vanessa saw in him that she decided was worth all of this. I don't think it was love, exactly. I think she saw someone who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he was desperate to solve. And maybe for a while that felt like being chosen. Maybe for a while it felt like everything I'd failed to make her feel for years. Honestly, I sat with that for a long time on that highway. Because if I'm being fair to myself and to this story, I wasn't a bad husband in the ways that make the news. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't unfaithful. I didn't gamble or drink. But I was tired. I was always tired. And tired has a way of making the person next to you feel invisible, without anyone meaning for it to happen. I don't say that to excuse what she did. There's no version of this where stealing payroll money and abandoning your son is a reasonable response to feeling overlooked. But I think about it because you can be wronged and still ask yourself honest questions. That's not weakness. That's the only way to not make the same mistakes in whatever comes next. The motel was a one-story place off an exit ramp, blue doors, ice machine, losing an argument with itself in the parking lot. The clerk, a woman named Shelley, mid-40s, looked me over the way people do when they've already heard a version of your story from the other side. "You, Raymond?" "Yes, ma'am." She handed me a coffee without asking, and led me to the back office. Shelley told me Marcus's cards declined multiple times. He complained loudly about towel quality. He demanded a room upgrade at a $40 a night motel. "Sir," she said, "I've worked this desk for 11 years. That man had con written all over him from the minute he walked in." She paused. "Your wife looked tired. Not mean, tired." That hit somewhere complicated. The backpack the police had cleared held 2 prepaid phones, a pawn receipt from Indianapolis, Marcus's fake ID, a different fake ID with Vanessa's photo under a new last name, a folded motel notepad page. Shelley pointed to a side pocket. That one, specifically. Inside was a bus ticket, Memphis, 1 passenger, Marcus Devon Webb, not Vanessa. Folded around it, written in blocky handwriting on motel stationery. Clarksville was supposed to be 1 night. "You held us up. After Memphis, I'm handling my own situation. Don't call the number I gave you." I sat down in Shelley's office chair before I decided to. There it was. Vanessa thought she was escaping towards something. Marcus was running a different play entirely, using her access to my accounts as seed money for his next move, with no intention of taking her past the first convenient exit. She hadn't blown up our life for a love story. She'd blown it up to fund someone else's escape route. She was the mark, not the partner. Part of me, and I'm not proud of this either, felt something close to grim satisfaction. And then the satisfaction curdled almost immediately, because once upon a time, this woman held my hand in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours. Once upon a time, she drove through a January snowstorm to bring Darius warm socks when his basketball tournament ran late. You loved someone for 19 years, and even when they've done the worst thing they've ever done, the years don't disappear. They just sit there, complicated, demanding to be acknowledged. On the drive back, I called Darius from a rest stop in Kentucky. I didn't tell him everything, but I told him Marcus had been running his own con on Vanessa the whole time, that she hadn't been his partner so much as his resource. There was a long pause. Then Darius said, "So she got played by the person she picked over us." Not angry, just clear. "Seems like it," I said. Another pause. His voice went smaller. I kept thinking maybe she'd come back and say she made a mistake. Before it got this far, I looked through the rest stop windows at a family eating sandwiches at a picnic table. Father, mother, 2 kids, regular Tuesday afternoon. "I know, Dee," I said. "Me too." And I meant it. Because some part of me had been waiting too, not for her to come back, exactly, but for there to be some version of this story where everyone got out without permanent damage. That version didn't exist. The sooner I accepted that, the sooner I could focus on the version that did. Vanessa called me from an unknown number 2 days later. I almost didn't answer. When I did, I heard her breathing fast, uneven, the breathing of someone who has been crying for a long time and is trying to hold it together for a phone call. Raymond. Her voice was cracked around the edges. Not the sharp, decided voice from the note, something much older than that. "Marcus got arrested. I don't have my purse. I don't have anything." I said, "I know. Please don't lecture me right now." "I'm not lecturing you. I'm just not rescuing you." She started crying harder. "He said we were going to." She stopped herself. "I know what he said, Vanessa." I kept my voice level. I was proud of that. He also bought a bus ticket to Memphis in his name only. Did you know that? Silence. You were never part of the plan past Clarksville. More silence. Then, quietly, tell Darius I love him. I held the phone very still. No, I said. You can tell him yourself someday if he's willing to hear it. I won't carry messages for you. That's done. She had no answer to that. I stayed on the shoulder of I-65 for a full minute after the call ended. Hazard lights blinking, watching semis blow past in the rain. If you've ever had to say something hard and true to someone you once loved with everything you had, and hold the line when every old instinct says to soften it, then you know what that minute on the shoulder felt like. You know the particular exhaustion of being the one who tells the truth when the other person still wants comfort. I'm not asking for credit. I'm just saying it costs something. Everything true does. The hearing was on a gray Thursday in Wayne County Family Court. I wore the charcoal suit I keep for funerals and serious conversations. Darius told me I looked like a mechanic who'd been handed a briefcase and told to figure it out. Is that a compliment? I asked. He shrugged. It's accurate. My attorney, a woman named Carol Asante, calm, organized, the kind of lawyer who arranges evidence the way a surgeon lays out instruments, met us outside the courtroom with 2 folders and an expression that had absorbed every flavor of human disaster without flinching. Ready? She asked. No. Good, she said. Means you're not overconfident. Darius waited in the hallway with Vanessa's mother, Dorothy, gray coat, red eyes, clearly not sleeping either. Dorothy had called me the week before asking to meet. She'd shown up at the shop carrying printed emails and a voicemail transcript. She called me before she left, Dorothy said quietly. I didn't understand how serious it was at the time. One email contained a line that made my jaw lock. Once the money clears, Raymond won't know what happened until Monday. Dorothy looked ashamed holding the paper. I love my daughter, she said. But I won't lie for her. In the hallway before the hearing, Dorothy hugged Darius for a long time. Then she looked at me over his shoulder and said simply, take care of my grandson. Not a request. Not a plea. A transfer of trust. That meant more than almost anything else that week. Courtrooms smell like burnt coffee, wet wool coats, and accumulated human trouble. Fluorescent lights. Old wood. Everyone pretending to be calmer than they are. Vanessa sat at the opposite table in a dark blazer, looking familiar enough to still knock the air out of me for 1 second before the feeling passed. Her attorney went first: emotional loneliness, feeling unseen in the marriage, vulnerability exploited by Marcus. For about 15 minutes, it was working. Vanessa cried quietly and precisely. She talked about feeling invisible in her own home. She said, Raymond was present in the shop. He wasn't always present in the marriage. I want to tell you that landed wrong because it was false. I'd be lying. It landed because there was enough truth in it to hurt the truth that I was tired, that I worked long hours, that I sometimes came home and had nothing left. That's the ugly thing about betrayal from someone who knew you well. They know exactly which accusations have enough truth to make you question everything. I sat there for one terrible moment wondering if I'd made her feel invisible for years without knowing it. Wondering if maybe I was more responsible for this than I'd been willing to admit. Then Carol stood up and I watched that moment evaporate. No speeches. No drama. Just documents. Laid out in order. Explained in plain language. Bank transfers. Business account access attempts. Timeline of account activity cross-referenced with Marcus's known whereabouts. Hotel records. Prepaid phone records. The fake IDs from the motel backpack. Dorothy's voicemail transcript. Carol read it aloud into a room that went very still. Once the money clears, Raymond won't know what happened until Monday. Then the bus ticket. 1 passenger. Marcus Devon Webb. Shelley from the motel appeared by video call, sitting behind her desk with her reading glasses and a cup of coffee. Judge Whitmore reminded her she was under oath. Yes, Your Honor. Carol asked her to describe Marcus's behavior at checkout. Shelley sighed. He disputed the towel count while paying with a card he knew was declined. Took him 4 tries to figure that out. Someone in the gallery coughed to hide a sound that wasn't quite a cough. Then Carol introduced the bus ticket. 1 passenger. She let the document sit in front of the judge for a moment before asking, quietly, Mrs. Cole, were you aware Mr. Webb had purchased a ticket to Memphis in his name only? The courtroom got very still. Vanessa's attorney put down his pen. He said we were going to meet in Memphis, Vanessa said. Her voice was controlled. He said he was going ahead to secure the... She stopped. Nobody moved. The judge looked up from the document. He said you were going to meet him? Judge Whitmore's voice was completely level. In Memphis. As in, he was already traveling separately. Vanessa realized what she'd said. I watched it register on her face, not in slow motion, exactly, but the way you see someone understand that a door they were about to walk through isn't there anymore. She looked at her attorney. He was looking at his notepad. Mrs. Cole, the judge said, are you aware that the account transfers you authorized occurred after Mr. Webb's bus ticket was purchased? Silence. The real kind. Judge Whitmore ruled exactly as Carol had projected. Temporary restrictions on disputed accounts remained. No access to business funds. Primary residential stability for Darius with me, while custody matters were formally addressed. Fraud investigation recommended for financial crimes associated with Marcus. Not a movie verdict. Not a clean ending. Some of the money was simply gone, spent, or scattered before any freeze could catch it. My reputation in the neighborhood would take time to rebuild. People hear fraud and frozen accounts, and they start wondering where exactly the edges are, even when you're clearly on the right side of them. But for the first time since that Tuesday morning and the cold ring on the paper towel, the truth existed somewhere official, somewhere outside my own exhausted head. That mattered more than I expected it to. After the hearing, in the hallway, Vanessa approached Darius. I stayed back. I didn't know what he would do. He stood still while she crouched in front of him, and for a moment she just looked at him, her son, who she'd left a note about, the way you note what to do with furniture. I'm still your mother, she said. Darius looked at her for a long time. Then he said softly, that's exactly why it hurt this much. No yelling, no tears from him. Just a 13-year-old boy, telling the truth with more precision than most adults manage. Vanessa started crying. Darius didn't move toward her. He turned and walked to me, and slipped his hand into mine, and something inside my chest that had been locked since that Tuesday morning finally, carefully, opened. A month later, life was still hard. Not dramatically hard, just the regular kind. The payroll is tight, reputation takes time, sleep still not great kind of hard. Brenda kept threatening to go home early if I skipped lunch again. Detective Bryce checked in occasionally about the fraud case's progress. A few customers came back, a few didn't. That's life. You don't get to choose who believes you when it counts. One Saturday afternoon, Darius and I worked together on a '69 Chevelle that had been sitting under a tarp in Bay 2 for almost 2 years. Owner got sick, project stalled, car just waited. Classic rock on the shop radio. Rain on the metal roof. Same sound as that terrible Tuesday morning, except now it felt different. Less like a verdict, more like just weather. Darius handed me a socket wrench and launched into an analysis of why the Lions were going to be different this year. I nodded with the patience of a man legally obligated to support optimism. The shop smelled like oil, warm metal, coffee from the machine in the corner that Brenda refuses to replace, because she says it builds character. Normal things. Good things. I looked around the shop at some point and realized it no longer felt haunted. Just worn. Familiar. Mine. I used to think that getting through betrayal meant some kind of settling of scores, some moment where the person who hurt you finally understood the damage they caused. I don't think that anymore. Real recovery is quieter than revenge. It's waking up one morning and realizing you're thinking about the Chevelle, not the ring on the paper towel. It's your kid handing you a wrench and trusting you to keep the lights on. It's Brenda threatening to retire and never actually retiring. It's the shop still standing. It's being the person the people who stayed chose to stay for. If someone out there is rebuilding from scratch right now, if someone took the thing you built and walked out with it and left you standing in the middle of what used to be your life, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't get your old life back, but you can build something the next chapter deserves. Start there. Before I go, I want to hear from you. If you think Raymond handled things the right way throughout this, comment the number 1. If you think he made mistakes along the way but came out right in the end, comment 2. And if this story brought something up for you, something from your own life you've been carrying, comment 3. You don't have to explain it, just 3. I'll see you in the comments. Also, where are you watching this from, and what time is it there? I'm always amazed by who finds these stories and when. And if you've ever been in a position where someone you trusted completely rewrote the story of your life without your permission, you know where the bottom of this felt like. Tell me. I want to know I'm not sending this into the void. If these stories mean something to you, subscribe. Hit the bell. It genuinely helps, and it keeps me telling them. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Detroit, Michigan to create original content. All characters, names, and events are fictional. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.